So here we are in a modern scientific laboratory. Is this where people are able to find out about God and what things God does and what things he doesn't do? Is science encroaching on who God is and what God is involved in? I don't think so. As we talk about things today, we want to find out how we think about this whole idea of God's work in the world and what we can discover by science and how the two relate. It's important for our understanding of the Bible so that we know what the Bible is doing and what science is doing. Once we've talked about the issue of biblical authority, we have to start thinking about how that relates to how we think about science and about the world around us. And as we try to integrate those things, sometimes people talk about the Word and the world. God's communicated through both, and we want to try to make sure we see all of those things together the way that we ought to. We've already talked about the idea that in literature, like we find in the biblical account of origins, the artist, the writer, the communicator has made choices about how to communicate to the audience that he is addressing. And in those choices, it's not a matter of something being true or false. The artist's conventions are simply the one that they've chosen. And we have to try to understand those conventions so that we can get the truth that is being conveyed there. Now, there's where we might sometimes find some perceived conflict with the way we think about our world, because our world is describing things through other conventions. As scientists do their work and describe the world and how it works, they're working from a different model than what Scripture is working from. They're trying to understand the truth of the world, but they're just working at it a different way. And so sometimes as we look at the conventions for scientific investigation and communication and compare that to the biblical text, we feel like there may be some conflict that's there that needs to be resolved. And so we have to think about how we can talk about these two aspects of what we believe is the larger body of truth that is meaningful to us today. Now, one of the first things that we have to talk about then is this whole question about that which is natural or that which is supernatural. Obviously, when we have our theology that we bring to the world around us, we believe that God is active. He has been in the past. God is responsible for all of origins and all of creation, all of the sustaining of the world. That's what God does. Yet, at the same time, scientists are trying to understand the same world with a cause and effect understanding. Now I'm not a scientist and I don't pretend to be able to talk about science and what they do, except in the most general terms. But that's kind of the level of investigation that's involved. Cause and effect that can be explained by natural laws and those kinds of ideas. So the question of what is natural, that is cause and effect, natural laws, what is supernatural? What's God involved in? And sometimes when we get thinking about that question today, we think in terms of, let's say, a pie. And we've got this pie, which let's call it the origins pie. And that pie we have sliced up into pieces, all the different aspects of origins. And we try to figure out, well, is that part something that God did, or is it something that has a natural explanation? And so we start labeling our pie pieces with the whipped cream, N for natural and S for supernatural. And the minute that we find out something has a natural explanation, we have to eat that whipped cream with the S and put an N on it, okay, because it's going to be differently understood. Well, the problem with that view is that the more we understand, the more science is able to explain, the smaller and smaller the supernatural part of the pie, until there are hardly any S's left on there. And that feels like God is being diminished and reduced. Okay? Now, the problem with that viewpoint is the dessert. We've got the wrong dessert here. Now, what we really need to think about, instead of a pie that we're slicing up, to think about a cake, a layer cake, a birthday cake. And in that cake, we can think about the lower level as representing the natural world with natural explanations, laws that help us to understand and explain things, and that can be understood and investigated by scientists. The top layer of the cake is what God is doing. That top layer of the cake covers everything on the bottom layer. No matter what science discovers or explains, that doesn't reduce God's role in it. Whatever happens in this world or in the origins of this world is something God is doing. Whether natural explanations exist or not doesn't affect the matter. Actually, in the ancient world, they only thought of cause and effect in personal terms. That is, either people or gods. Okay, those are the only categories of cause and effect. They had no such category as natural cause and effect. And so in the Bible, they're going to attribute it all to either people or God. The fact that they attribute something to God doesn't mean that we're out of bounds to look for a natural explanation. Now, some things I don't expect we would ever find a natural explanation. The resurrection, the incarnation, okay, but other things we may. And if we do, that's all right. If some of the plagues could be explained by natural cause and effect, that's okay. God was doing it anyway. Okay, so we have to understand the categories and how we work with the categories. Think of the cake. Science can explore that bottom layer all they want, explain as much of the world as we understand the natural laws, the cause and effect, the mechanisms, whether it's origins or whether it's operations. They can explain everything as much as they would like to do, but that top layer is still over all of it. Okay, so we just have to get the right dessert. Now, when we start thinking about this in more specific terms, we have to understand that in the Bible, there is no new scientific revelation. God does not seek to change the way that they thought about the mechanisms of the world around them and its operations. He has a lot of new information to tell them about himself, about what he's doing in the world, and those kinds of things. But there's no new scientific revelation about the mechanics or operations of the world. Instead, he's content to communicate to them on the basis of what they already understand. Okay, so, for instance, an example. In the ancient world, they believed that the thinking, cognitive, emotive processes all took place down here. Okay, the liver, the kidney, the heart, the intestines, even the stomach. Sometimes I think with my stomach. But at any rate, the idea here is that all of those processes took place down here, not up here. They've got a different physiology, a way of thinking about physiology than what we do. That's why throughout the Bible you'll find the discussions about thinking with your heart, what you think in your heart, how you act from your heart. Because that's the physiology that they believed. God doesn't change it. God doesn't say, don't think in terms of your heart, think in terms of your brain. There is no biblical Hebrew word for brain. Even passages that talk about all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, that word for mind, entrails. Your translators are helping you. Okay, so all of those processes took place here as far as they were concerned. Again, the point being, God does not give them scientific revelation to upgrade their understanding of something like physiology, nor of meteorology, nor of anatomy, nor of any of the scientific processes that are part of our world. God's not upgrading them. Okay, so we have to understand then that when we read those parts in the Bible's not trying to give us an authoritative science. It's communicating about what God is doing in the world using the science that they knew as they knew it. So, as we talk then about God and his cause and effect processes, God's role in that does not replace a natural cause and effect. So, say that another way, the observation of natural cause and effect does not remove God from the picture. Take Psalm 139:13. The psalmist says, "You have knit me together in my mother's womb." And we could all affirm that God has knit us together in our mother's womb. That doesn't mean that embryology is godless garbage, okay, that we can't pay any attention to because the Bible tells us how that happens. No, the fact is everything that we learn about embryology is helping us to understand how God knits us together in our mother's wombs. So the fact that the Bible gives a divine statement about cause and effect does not mean that we cannot look for natural cause and effect or could not accept an explanation of natural cause and effect. Okay, the two are operating separately. We've got two different layers of the cake. Now, as we approach these issues, some people would be in a category that we call concordism. In concordism, we have a situation where people are trying to either read science into the Bible or they're trying to read science out of the Bible. This is concordism as an interpretive tool. Those who want to read science out of the Bible will read a statement in Genesis 1 about the waters above and the waters below. And they'll say, well, the Bible's always true, so there must be waters above and waters below. So that becomes part of our science. Now, of course, when they recognize that it's kind of hard to find those waters above, they might either speculate on waters above that used to be there, or they might try to give a modern scientific explanation like it's the clouds or it's the atmosphere in some way. But of course, then what's happening? You're giving modern meanings to Hebrew words. And suddenly the authority and the integrity of the communication is being forfeited because we're trying to make that text say something that it never meant. And the problem then with reading a science out of the text is that it's working on the assumption that the text is doing science, which it is not. Okay, if you want to read science into the text, we run into the same difficulty. If we try to say that God stretching out the heavens is some kind of cryptic allusion to the expanding universe, we've got a little bit of a difficulty. It didn't mean that to them. The authority is what it meant to them. And therefore, we have to understand that that's not a scientific statement and that the text really isn't talking about the Big Bang or the expanding universe or things of that sort, molecules or photons or nebulae. The text is not addressing those things. And we can't expect to read that between the lines of the text because then we are inserting what we are then attributing authority to. Instead, we take something called accommodation. Accommodation is when we are understanding that God has accommodated the human author and audience's understanding as he communicates to them. He's using a framework of communication that reflects things that they believe so that he can make the point he needs to make. After all, it really doesn't matter what you think with. God's interested that you think godly thoughts, that you think pure thoughts, that you think faithful thoughts. He's not interested in what you think with. And so that's not part of the revelation. Again, we're back to the focus of revelation. Now, we've always heard, and it's true, the Bible is not a science textbook. Okay, but we have implications for that we have to follow. As we've mentioned, not only is it not a science textbook, but there's no new scientific revelation in the Bible. Everything that's there is compatible with old world science. It's things that Israel already thought, things that everybody around them thought. After all, everybody in the ancient world believed there was waters above. Everybody in the ancient world believed you thought with your entrails and your heart and your kidney and your liver. This is not new information, and it's not information that corrects. Likewise, it's not an authoritative statement that we now have to figure out how our blood pumps do cognitive processes. Okay, that's not the focus of the revelation. So we have to consider carefully what scientific claims the Bible might be making. If it's not a science textbook and it has no new scientific information, then what scientific claims are there? Now again, we have to tread carefully here. We have to see there's a difference, for instance, between a historical claim and a scientific claim. If we're talking about something like the parting of the Red Sea, there's a historical claim and there's a theological claim. Okay, but what is the scientific claim And those are the things we have to sort out carefully. Some scientific ideas could be inferred from the biblical text to be entailments, but many of those are actually the result of interpretation or are simply cultural understandings for communication and really not the focus of revelation. So we have to understand distinctions when we are considering claims versus entailments. A final example. We have, for instance, raw text. The Bible uses the word day, yom, to talk about the 7 days of creation. That's what the text says. Interpretation of that text would say yom is a 24-hour period. That's interpretation. A scientific claim is that the earth is therefore young. And then the supposed possible scientific entailment would be that the Big Bang and the expanding universe are all unacceptable ideas, unbiblical. We have to draw distinctions between the text or interpretation, the claims, and the entailments.